Gone Girl is the story of deceit, how we deceive our loved ones, strangers, and ourselves. Nick and Amy have been married for 5 years, with the traditional ups and downs that entails. After a series of money problems and loss of interest in his wife, Nick has an affair with a younger woman. Feeling betrayed by this, and being unsatisfied with her life in general, Amy stages her own death to frame Nick for murder. Nick is hounded by both the police and the media. Amy was the basis for a series of children's books and is a minor celebrity, and because of this, clueless pundits, like this Nancy Grace facsimile, presume guilt on his part and slowly destroy his life. Nick uncovers Amy's plot, turns the media to his favor, all the while Amy's plans unravel. She returns home and, for reasons that only make sense to herself, forces Nick to resume their relationship as if nothing happened. The film is told in 2 parallel narratives. We see the present from the perspective of Nick, and we see flashbacks from Amy's voiceover narration. We only discover halfway through the film that she is an unreliable narrator, and that the audience, much like the characters in the film, are being deceived. A kind of meta-commentary on the central theme of the film. We saw the trailer to the film, we saw the flashbacks, and we assumed that Nick may have murdered his wife, because we are so accustomed to film presenting us with data in a linear, no tricks up my sleeve fashion. David Fincher films are obscene by design. He began his feature film career with Alien 3, a direct sequel to Aliens, but tonally akin to the original Alien, a dark, unforgiving, impersonal universe that cares nothing for the value of life. This nihilism has continued over the course of his more acclaimed works and tattoos itself into the skin of Gone Girl. His films have an obscene amount of product placement, not too surprising from a director who sometimes makes commercials. Fight Club notoriously had a Starbucks coffee cup in many different scenes, a nod to its proliferation as much as it was vulgar mandate. A key plot point in Gone Girl surrounds a woodshed full of ill-gotten merchandise, all brand names. Somehow these vulgarities don't take the audience out of the movie the way product placement often does, ruining and cheapening the art. By incorporating these brand names into the narrative more seamlessly than any other director, Fincher simply creates a believable world full of familiar brands and consumer products. The barrier between audience and media is made invisible through its inclusion. A world is made that much more real. And what of these worlds? A nameless city, like in Seven. Purposefully given no title so that it could happen anywhere. Of course that was Fincher's early work. Some happen in suburbia, like in Gone Girl, or rich neighborhoods or opulent buildings, like The Social Network and The Game. Locations populated by privileged, disaffected, white psychopaths who have way too much time and or money on their hands. Characters who have everything. The unnamed narrator from Fight Club certainly fits the bill. A high-paying job, relative youth, and enough excess money to afford not only a solid apartment in a big city, but all the furnishings he could want. And in his success, his complacency, he still feels like a victim of society, as opposed to actual victims of racial, social, and economic injustice. He believes he has it so bad with his decked-out IKEA furniture that his mind creates a violent outlet for himself in the form of an alternate personality. The narrator has the privilege of rallying against the system, consumerism and by extension money as the root of all evil, because he never wants for money. He has a lucrative career for a powerful corporation. He can play house with Tyler Durden in an abandoned mansion and pretend to be poor for kicks while still cashing checks for his steady, upper-middle-class strata occupation. Nicholas, the protagonist of The Game, is incredibly wealthy, living in an extravagant mansion, wanting for nothing. His brother laments having to buy him a birthday present because, as he puts it, what do you give the man who has everything? Nicholas is so bored with never having to worry about paying the bills, or roughly anything else, that he participates in a dangerous and expensive game that warps his reality. When it's revealed that it's actually harmless, Nicholas immediately forgives everyone for putting him through hell and writes a huge check to the company that runs the game. After all, why on earth should he care? He literally has everything he could ever want. Not to mention protagonists like real-life billionaire Mark Zuckerberg of The Social Network, Meg of Panic Room, a woman who can afford a 4-story brownstone on the affluent Upper West Side of New York City, and Mikhail of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a magazine owner who spends a good portion of the movie in the aristocratic family compound of a business magnate. And then there's Amy, a woman who has everything, grew up rich, and still wants to frame her husband for murder. That's not to say that people who never have to worry about the electricity bill don't have problems. They absolutely do, and that's the point. Everyone is a ruinous mess, according to these films. Fincher seems drawn to stories that reinforce his worldview. He is aware of these obscenities, this vulgar lens in which he views the world, once proclaiming in an interview that we are all perverts. His filmography, his oeuvre, is obscene, but it rings true in self-awareness. He knows he's a pervert, and he unflinchingly believes the same of his audience. To him, it does not actually seem like a value judgment, more like resignation to what we are, understanding what is deep inside us as a kind of starting point and then creating his worlds from there. Although Fincher himself does not write his films, there must be something attractive about this kind of suburban or even upper-class horror, these thrillers about how everyone is a damaged, terrified monster. With a couple notable exceptions, his filmography is decorated with these familiar themes, treading the same ground until a well-worn path is made. While Fincher has a kind of resigned pessimism about all people, including himself, Gone Girl examines a similar but noticeably different outlook, the human being's pessimism about other human beings, but not oneself. In this film, characters frequently judge one another with little to no evidence to make such assumptions. Their uninformed judgments pointedly attack others. Fincher believes we are all perverts, but characters in Gone Girl mistakenly believe everyone else is a pervert, but not themselves. It's no surprise that the story spoke to him, and he chose this project. Nick is caught off guard by a woman who wants to take a picture with him. He realizes this could be misconstrued, but she refuses to delete the picture. The media destroys him for this, claiming he was flirting with another woman. It's easy to assume the worst and difficult to put ourselves in the shoes of others and acknowledge the possibility of innocence. In this scene, based solely on footage of Nick and his sister Margot seen together, the irresponsible host and guest on a cable news show heavily suggests that the siblings engage in incest. This is based on precisely nothing, a sensationalism that not only speaks ill of the news media, but also our desire to see strangers as the other and as perverted, but never ourselves. Someone watching the show remarks that this is obviously twincest, and he is more than willing to accept the alleged deviancy of two people he has never met and never will know. It's a kind of deflection, a way to protect oneself from not thinking we are the perverts. Even Amy is subjected to this. Though she largely escapes scrutiny from the media, her new friend, who doesn't realize who she is, speaks of Amy as someone who brought everything on herself. The only person besides family to assume Nick is no worse than himself is Tanner Bolt, the defense attorney. Maybe because, in Bolt's line of work, he has seen it all and understands human nature better than most.
Do you not believe me?
No, I believe you. It's just the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Keep in mind that this film's commentary on purposeful misconceptions about other people and obfuscating facts to make oneself feel better does not appear to be about the news media itself. It's about something broader than that. In Gone Girl, the news media is a stand-in or representative for our insecure judgments about other people. Gone Girl, as a mystery, breaks from the traditions and trappings of the genre. In a mystery, there is an inciting action, usually a crime in this genre, an investigation, a revelation of who done it in the third act, and then a resolution of the surviving characters. Gone Girl has the inciting action, the disappearance of Amy, but its revelation occurs 1 hour and 6 minutes into its 2 hour and 29-minute runtime, less than halfway through the film. And its ending, well, it's not an ending. It's open-ended. Nobody pays for their crimes, and we are left on a question. Gone Girl is not a realistic story. The circumstances are highly implausible, even comical, but the lack of resolution is realistic enough. Sometimes things just go on and on and on. Frankly, movies largely do not portray what a marriage feels like. Movies about relationships that end in marriage, or about characters who are already married at the start, usually follow one of two pathways. First, they can idealize romance and show two people who are deeply committed to one another, going to great lengths to preserve their love, exchanging valentines, going on epic quests, etc. But this sets expectations of romance unnaturally high. Our models for what a relationship is comes more from fiction than reality, because the first relationship we are usually aware of, our parents, is typically something we don't fully witness. Parents keep the intimate part of their relationship between themselves. They're not having sex in front of their children, one hopes. We unconsciously base what we know about relationships from fiction. It's why heterosexual women sometimes romanticize their partners, calling them Prince Charming, Romeo, or Knight in Shining Armor. All fictitious accounts of great lovers and bastions of good. I would recount the words heterosexual men call their idealized woman, but it's usually too dirty. The second pathway for showing a film about a relationship is an even more toxic battle of the sexes. The very name presents a host of problems that engenders mistrust. But a film as a medium can be forgiven for not showing realistic marriages because, in all honesty, marriages do not make for exciting drama. If one is in a good, solid marriage, one might find it rewarding, of course, but it's mostly a series of daily tasks and a repetition of two people who usually already know what the other is going to say before they open their mouth. Gone Girl actually shows the consequences of the first trapping I mentioned about the lie we like to tell ourselves about every romance. Most romances just aren't fairy tales. Nick and Amy do not have a perfect marriage. They argue about money, for example. This is referenced in a scene early in the film, in which a married police officer says that's what he and his wife fight about, and that was the same constant argument the detective had with her ex. Nick and Amy have a marriage that had infidelity. Nick was unfaithful. Amy believed this was a terrible betrayal, and it definitely was, but it was also completely common. I would argue that Gone Girl does not fail by showing us yet another battle of the sexes, because it actually shows us how we irrationally perceive our relationships. We think we know our partner because of some storybook romance we once heard that burrowed into our minds without our noticing, but much as Nick uncovers, he never really knew his wife. She was faking her personality the whole time. According to Amy, Nick is just another man who believes in the cool girl, a woman who is pressured into acting a certain way for a man. Nick is someone who society told that a woman exists solely to satisfy a man's desires, and he's unable to see the real, flawed human being beneath the facade. While Amy is almost certainly a sociopath, her description of patriarchal society actually has some merit. And Amy's idealized quest for the perfect marriage and her mask of being the perfect girlfriend, and later the perfect wife, blew up in her face when she discovered that Nick screws up the same way most husbands eventually do given enough time. This drive for perfection likely stems from her parents creating a perfect version of herself, Amazing Amy, the storybook character that she could never live up to. Regardless of why she did this, Amy willingly participated in the false narrative, still not guessing that it would not be enough. When their irrational notion of what a marriage is supposed to be is shattered, they misbehave in terrible ways and believe they are both justified because they didn't get the fairy tale romance that society told them they were entitled to. In fact, even after the jig is up and Amy returns home, knowing that Nick no longer loves her, she still wants to be with him. She wants the illusion of the perfect marriage. She lives in illusions, in shadows. Maybe, on some level, we all do. One thing is clear. Nick is not deluded about one thing. As I said, people don't want to think of themselves as the perverts, as the monsters, and deflect those perversions to others to feel more secure. Nick's final words in the film are not just about her. He says, we. He's not deflecting. He's talking about his wife and himself.
What have we done to each other? What will we do?